Man, I read a quote today. It says that do something you're good at or do something you love. I love this stuff. I I've always had a yearning for learning. Yearning for learning. But anyway, when I learned how to read, I learned how to learn. I'm just so redundant tonight, but science, medical science, I love medical science. I'm talking about real medical science, not the sorcery that a lot of people are learning. But check this out. I think last week I told somebody that structure and function is you cannot separate the two. If you want to know the function of something, you have to understand the structure. They kind of just laughed at me, but I don't care. But see this article right here, it kind of just drives that point home. I remember I told somebody one time that the corpus callosum is the bridge that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. It's larger and thicker in females. So the female brain, the hemispheres kind of like, they kind of like closer to each other. So it's that whole phenomenon of multitasking and whatnot. And men, especially like me, like I suck at multitasking. But when I lock into something, watch out, cause I'm coming. All right. But let me just break this down right quick. I spent a minute and 30 seconds just talking. All right. So this is called How Our Brains Differ. The neuroscience literature shows that the human brain is a sex-type organ with a distinct anatomical difference in neural structures and accompanying physiological differences in function, says Professor UC Irwin, Professor of Neurobiology and Behavior, Larry Cahill, PhD. Cahill edited the 70 article February 2017 issue of the Journal of Neuroscience Research, the first year issue of any neuroscience journal devoted entirely to the influence of sex differences on the nervous system function. Okay, we're not just arbitrarily designed, basically. Brain imaging studies indicate that these differences extend well beyond the strictly reproductive domain, Cahill says. Adjusted for total brain size, men's brains are bigger. Ha ha. That means we're smarter. No, it doesn't. It just means we have more muscle mass. That's all. That's really all it's saying, because muscles are highly innervated. A woman's hippocampus. I think that's the memory and no, that's the memory. That's the memory part of the brain. The hippocampus, critical to learning and memorization. Ah, look at that. What? It's larger than a man's and works differently. See, look at that. I love that. Works differently. Conversely, a man's amygdala, that's where the emotions are stored, associated with the experience of emotions. See, bam, look at me. And the recollection of such experiences is bigger than a woman's. It too works differently, as Cahill's research has demonstrated. In 2000, Cahill scanned the brains of men and women viewing either highly aversive films of emotion or emotionally neutral ones. The aversive films were expected to trip off something negative. Look at, I'm adding words. The aversive films were expected to trip off strong negative emotions and shit. Concomitant con let me see concomitant concomitant imprinting in the amygdala, an almond-shaped structure found in each brain hemisphere. Activity in the amygdala during the viewing experience, as expected, predicted subjects' later ability to recall the viewed clips. But in women, this relationship was observed only in the left amygdala. In men, it was only in the right amygdala. Cahill and others have since confirmed these results. Discoveries like this one should ring researchers alarm buzzers. Women, it's known, retain stronger, more vivid memories of emotional events than men do. That's kind of subjective, because how can they really measure that? They recall emotional memories more quickly. Okay, well, that's how they can measure it. More quickly and the ones they recall are richer and more intense. Okay, that's subjective. If, as is likely, the amygdala figures into depression or anxiety, any failure to separately analyze men and women's brains to understand their differences, their different susceptibilities to either syndrome would be self-defeating as not knowing left from right. I'm going to read that again. If, as is likely, the amygdala figures into depression or anxiety, any failure to separately analyze men and women's brains to understand their different susceptibilities to either syndrome will be as self-defeating as not knowing left from right. That's a huge statement. The two hemispheres of a woman's brain talk to each other more than a man's do. In 2014 study, University of Philadelphia researchers imaged the brains of 428 males and 521 female youths, an uncharacteristically large sample, and found that females' brains consistently showed more strongly coordinated activity between hemispheres, while the male brain's activity was more tightly coordinated with local brain regions. That's just what I was saying earlier. This finding and confirmation of results in smaller studies published earlier tracks closely with others' observations that the corpus callosum, the white matter cable that crosses and connects the hemispheres, is bigger in women than in men, and that women's brains tend to be more bilateral, symmetrical than men's. Okay, many of the cognitive differences appear quite early in life. Look at that. You see sex differences in spatial visualization ability in 2 and 3 month old infants. Well, I don't know I don't know any studies behind it. I don't know of any studies, so that's something good to look up. To some appreciable degree, these brain differences have to translate to behavior differences. I'm gonna stop right there because that's just what I said. Structure and function are interrelated. This is exciting for me because, you know, when I study something and I come up with my own kind of like I don't know, hypothesis, and then I see like credible tenured scientists that actually kind of like co-sign what I'm saying, like it's exciting. It just makes me know that maybe I was on the right track. Anyway, tell me what you think.